Hey, welcome to Think Thursday from the Alcohol Minimalist Podcast. Think Thursday is all about your beautiful, brilliant human brain. We're talking neuroscience. We're talking behavior change. We are talking about your mindset. Are you ready to get started? Let's go. Well, hello and welcome to Think Thursday from the Alcohol Minimalist. I'm Molly, and Think Thursdays are where I get to talk all about brain science and brain health, your mindset, and how all of these things really help us to, become better versions of ourselves, become better humans. And today I am talking about something called possibility thinking. Now, I didn't say positive thinking. I don't want you to mishear me. This isn't about repeating mantras or pretending that everything's fine when it clearly isn't, right? Some people call that toxic positivity. But we're going to dig into something more grounded, more useful, and frankly, more aligned with how your brain actually works. We will explore the difference between possibility thinking and traditional positive thinking, the brain science that makes possibility thinking so powerful. And I'm going to tell you a story about someone you might have heard of before, but really what was so extraordinary about him and what he did with nothing more than a possibility mindset. And this is not an episode, just a little side note, an episode about religion. But after you hear how possibility thinking rewires your brain and expands what you believe is possible, I hope you will become a believer too. So let's get into it. I hadn't heard the term possibility thinking. I feel kind of odd about that, but it's one of those things where when I heard it this week, I went down the rabbit hole and started uncovering kind of where it came from and some people that maybe coined the phrase early on. And possibility thinking is the mental habit of staying open and asking what else might be true. What haven't I tried yet? What if this could be different than I expect? It's really all about curiosity, which I talk about all the time, curiosity and compassion, right? With regards to asking ourselves better questions. I just had never heard it coined, the phrase, as possibility thinking, but I love it because it's not about pretending that everything is fine. It's not about affirmations or pretending to be confident when you're not. It's about staying open and mentally and emotionally to outcomes that you haven't experienced yet. It leans into that yet, right? It allows us the opportunity to believe that change is possible. Where positive thinking says this will work out, possibility thinking says maybe it can. Let's find out. It creates room for uncertainty without collapsing under it. And that distinction is very powerful and important. Let's look at what's happening in the brain when you engage in possibility thinking. When you consider a new future or a different approach, even hypothetically, of course, you're activating your prefrontal cortex. That prefrontal cortex is the beautiful, brilliant part of your human brain that allows you to think about the future. It's because we are humans and have that ability. That's truly what separates us, makes it possible to think about the future and create changes in our behavior. The prefrontal cortex is responsible for evaluating, planning. It is where imagining the future happens. It's also where long term decision making lives. And that's important because sustained change doesn't come from emotions, it comes from executive function. You also engage what researchers call the default mode network. We've talked about both the prefrontal cortex and the default mode network many times here on Think Thursday because they're such important parts of your brain and behavior change. And the default mode network is what lights up in your brain during reflection and mental time travel, right? So when you're imagining the future, that's the default mode network is lighting up. This is the system you're using when you mentally rehearse a better version of your day or of your life. And here's the kicker: repeated mental rehearsals actually build neural pathways, a neural scaffolding, if you will, just like doing reps at the gym. Dr. Jeffrey Schwartz, who is a UCLA neuroscientist, demonstrated that intention and focused attention can physically reshape brain circuitry. His work with OCD patients, those are obsessive compulsive disorder patients, showed that even naming a new possibility, like I might not have to act on this thought, began to rewire habitual pathways. We've talked about neuroplasticity and neural pathways so many times here on Think Thursday. I don't think we can talk about it enough because, quite honestly, it is the basis for how your brain works and what that looks like to actually create sustainable change. In short, possibility thinking is another way of brain training. I want to introduce you to the Reverend Robert Schuller. Maybe some of you know him. I have heard of him. Remember the Hour of Power from television back in the 1970s and 80s. He also he's a pastor and author, a very well-known TV personality, and he is also the founder of the Crystal Cathedral in Los Angeles. The Hour of Power reached millions of people worldwide. But before he had a congregation or a pulpit or even a church building, Schuller had possibility. In 1955, he arrived in Garden Grove, California, with nothing but a message and a vision. The local churches were full, there was no property, and no one was exactly waiting for a new preacher. But Schuller didn't think there's no room for me. He thought, what if church didn't have to be inside? So he rented a drive-in movie theater. He stood on top of the concession stand and he preached to people in their cars. Yes, really, he literally stood on the roof and gave sermons to a parking lot full of honking horns and folding lawn chairs. Now that's possibility thinking. What's available, not what's missing. And that moment, the concession stand pulpit, eventually led to one of the most iconic worship spaces in the world, the Crystal Cathedral, a soaring glass structure that Schuller built to reflect the light, quite literally, of possibility. Schuller wrote a book in 1967 called Move Ahead with Possibility Thinking, and he often said, the only place where your dream becomes impossible is in your own thinking. Now, I want you to repeat that. The only place where your dream becomes impossible is in your own thinking. That's not woo-woo. That's cognitive reality. Because when your thoughts shut down belief, your brain won't engage the pathways that lead to action. Another quote that I love: problems are not stop signs, they are guidelines. And one more: let your imagination release your imprisoned possibilities. That one reminds me of that Rumi quote that I love so much that I've shared so often. Why do you stay in prison when the doors are so wide open? You don't need to be religious to appreciate the kind of mindset that Schuller had. What Schuller was teaching was deeply aligned with neuroplasticity and with a growth mindset long before those were buzzwords. Here's where we come back to the difference between positive thinking and possibility thinking. Positive thinking often jumps straight to confidence. It says, I've got this. I'm going to succeed. This time I'll do it. And if you believe that, great. But when you don't believe it, when it feels hollow, your brain senses that disconnect. And instead of motivating you, it disengages you. Possibility thinking, on the other hand, works even when you're uncertain because it doesn't require belief. It only requires openness. We don't have to know how we're going to do it. We just have to believe that it's possible that we can figure it out. It says, I don't know how, but I am open to that idea. I can figure this out. I've never done this before, but maybe I can start. That's how you get to the next step, which leads to the next one, which leads to the next one, which leads to transformation. Let's bring this into practical, all right? I have a 5-step framework for you today that I want you to use when you feel stuck, all right? It's the possibility thinking in practice. The first thing you got to do is you got to notice your self-limiting beliefs. You got to notice the shutdown thought. I can't do this. I never follow through. This never works for me. Those are negative shutdown thoughts, and you need to notice them. You got to become awareness. We cannot change what we cannot see, right? Secondly, I want you to name that story. Is it really a fact, or is it a fact that you never follow through? Or is that just the story? Is that just a practiced belief? Spoiler, it's usually just a self-limiting belief, something that isn't actually true, right? I'm sure you can find an example of a time that you did follow through. Once you've noticed your shutdown thought, you've named it, you've realized that it's not actually a fact, but it's a practiced belief, a story, I want you to ask yourself a possibility question. What if this isn't about being perfect, but about trying again? What haven't I tried yet? What's one small thing that I could do differently today? Next, pick a believable, forward-facing thought. Maybe I can learn how to make this easier. It's possible that I'm closer than I think. Here's where it gets really important. Once you do these things, I want you to start repeating the new questions, the possibility questions, and the believable forward-facing thought. I want you to repeat them. Let it become your new internal narration. We often think change starts with big decisions, but more often change starts with a shift in thinking that feels just possible enough to move us. 1 degree of openness leads to 1 small action. And 1 small action leads to 1 new result. And that new result reinforces the possibility that you might not have been able to see before. It becomes a feedback loop of growth. So, what are you telling yourself is impossible right now? What area of your life have you already decided that you are stuck in, or it's too late, or it's too hard? What if? What would happen if you just opened that door of possibility just a crack? This week, I invite you to try something different. To start thinking using possibility thinking. Maybe I can. Let's find out. What if it's possible? Possibility thinking works. It's where change begins. And the reason it works is because it doesn't require us to know how. It just allows the possibility that we can figure it out. I want you to really decide today that you don't have to be positive, but you do want to believe in possibility. Instead of impossible, I am possible, right? Thank you so much for being here. I hope you get something out of this. I will link in the show notes to Reverend Schuller's books about possibility thinking. Again, I don't have anything to say about the Hour of Power or his, he was a very evangelistic Christian reverend. This isn't about his theological ideas, but I love his ideas around possibility thinking. And so I invite you to check those out as well. Have a great week, everyone. I will see you on Monday.